The greatest cost to war, first and foremost, will always be the cost in terms of human lives. Thus far, 7 American service members have died, and in Iran, there's been more than 1,300 deaths, primarily of civilians, including over 300 children. And in Lebanon, which Israel invaded following retaliatory attacks from Hezbollah in defense of Iran, 500,000 people have been displaced, and almost 400 people have been killed, including more than 80 children. And this doesn't even take into account the ongoing genocide in Gaza and Israeli annexation of the West Bank, where Palestinians are killed in terrorist attacks by Israeli settlers on a near daily basis. And life is precious, so we should always center human lives as the real cost of war. But there is a portion of the American population that doesn't care about wars unless it affects them personally. But unfortunately for those people, it will indeed affect them too, in a plethora of ways. Axios reports that the cost of oil and gas will predictably spike, and this is something that Americans have already been feeling at the gas pump. But on top of that, travel will become more expensive, as well as the cost of goods, especially plastics, seeing as how heating and cooling are necessities for the production of plastics, which requires oil and gas. But a lesser discussed aspect is the cost of groceries, because yes, that'll increase too, by a significant margin. And I talked to Kowalski, a Nebraskan farmer, who explains why this is the case.
We should expect grocery prices to probably rise from anywhere from like 5 to 10%, given what I knew a few days ago. The reason I believe this is going to be the case is because of the disruption to liquefied natural gas and fertilizer in the Middle East. We know when referencing 2022, any chart you go to around that time, there is a massive spike in commodities, and most of this is driven from fertilizer. Just so folks are aware, artificial fertilizer makes up about half of the calories we eat today. There is not enough naturally occurring fertilizer on this planet to keep all of our food systems going. So if there is any disruption to artificial fertilizer, it causes massive reverberations throughout our supply chain. And in the Middle East, particularly in the Strait or beyond the Strait of Hormuz, you have countries like Qatar, the UAE, and you have Saudi Arabia, who all produce a lot of liquefied natural gas. That is your primary energy source when you are making urea, which is a nitrogen-based fertilizer. I believe something like a third of all of that is actually produced directly there. And then the natural gas they export to places like Europe and to India, they also use that natural gas then to make fertilizer. So it's one of those things where they produce the fertilizer, but they also produce the good that you need to get the fertilizer. So with the Strait of Hormuz being, cut off right now, or disrupted to this degree, this has stopped the flow of nitrogen out of the Middle East. Right now, it is just pre-spring in the Northern Hemisphere. This is when we need fertilizer for the growing season. This is something that you cannot stop. This is a biological process. It works with, your calendar. It's not something that you can just, we'll do it later when the things get straightened out. No, this is you go now. And with this disruption, if it is anything similar to what we saw out of Ukraine, we are going to see a massive spike in fertilizer, and that cost will then reverberate down the line. So when it comes to cereal grains like corn and soybeans, this will lead to an indirect increase in the cost of like dairy products and meat products, your indirects, but we still use artificial fertilizers on fruits and vegetables, nuts, orchards, the whole lot there. So these costs will be felt for a while, because even if everything was sorted out today, we have 2 weeks worth of disruptions. And just like that shipping container that got stuck in the Suez Canal cost us like the planet $3 billion a day, this is similar to that, because we will now be rushing to try to basically fill the gap that has been forming. Fertilizer is not something we typically stockpile because it can explode. Fertilizer is the process on how you make artificial fertilizer is very similar to actually how you make explosives. This is all thermodynamics. This is the flow of energy, all of it. So this disruption, it's something that we can fix as soon as the situation is straightened out, but the logistics of actually moving physical tonnage of this is a problem. So once the ships get in there, there'll be this gap and delay. So everybody who's now receiving fertilizer, we are all expecting there to be shortages basically everywhere, and supply goes down, demand is actually ramping up. So you would expect the temporary price to increase. So this is pretty much a guaranteed hit at this point. Another issue to keep in mind, we live in the period of anthropomorphic climate change. So any disruptions like this combined with a natural disaster event is just going to keep compounding these problems. We're overdue for floods. We're overdue for more fires. We're overdue for droughts in a lot of areas. These things happen naturally. These things have been happening with greater frequency. There's been massive tornado outbreaks all across the Midwest recently, which is like 2 weeks early. The weather is very chaotic. So when you have people making rash decisions, as like the war in Ukraine was, as this war in the Persian Gulf is, it will cause disruptions. And if those get compounded with natural disasters, it might be something we can't realistically like overcome in a short period of time. Obviously, nothing about this conflict is good. I just generally don't like war, but if this conflict was something that had to occur for whatever reason, this was like the worst timing for it, because this is right as we're going into spring, when we're ramping up construction, when, you know, all of our planting equipment in the Northern Hemisphere is getting going. There was already going to be an increase in the demand for energy. There was already going to be this increase in demand for fertilizers. This is known. But if you do not have experts advising the people making decisions of these known quality or, these known quantities, you'll end up causing, basically chaos. So it's also important to remember, if there is a major, natural disaster, it's not like we're going to be suffering from shortages in the wealthier nations. We will simply buy the food. We might even go to war for some of the food. We won't be the ones missing out, but it will be the countries on the margins, like those in Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, that will be the ones suffering because they do not have the purchasing power like those of us in Europe, East Asia, and North America. So this puts a lot of stress on developing nations, which should be avoided at all costs, considering how much turmoil there is out there.
Now, assuming best case scenario unfolds and there's a solution to this tomorrow, so do you think that it's already too late for there to be a mitigation of any disruptions? Like, if everything were to be solved by tomorrow, let's say in a month or two, do you think that there would still be a spike in groceries? And if so, by how much, if you're able to predict something like that?
Best case scenario is 5%, because that is still going to beat the estimated inflation we were going to expect. Food prices always go up every year by 2.5% roughly. The issue we have is that with the way this conflict has gone, the safest thing an oil producing country can do if they are feeling like they might get attacked is shut the oil off. Do not pump it, because that reduces the risk of, your entire system going up in smoke. So if the conflict gets resolved now, the ships then have to traverse to their loading stations. It will take a while for them to hook up. It will take a while for them to get the pumps online. It'll take them a while to get all the pipelines moving again. So you're talking like maybe a week until like processes can resume. And then some of these ships, it's going to take them a full month to get to their ports. In that time, we're moving. Like on our farm, a month from now, we will be planting. You work off of the calendar. You do not get to just wait. So if the fertilizer doesn't arrive in time, you still have to plant. There are ways you can work around this, but it will mean a loss of production. So lower yields while we are expecting higher weather insecurity.
So the cost of groceries is going to go up, not just for Americans, but for people around the world, all because Donald Trump decided to invade a country that posed no threat to us. And even if things get sorted out really quickly, it's already unavoidable. It's too late. A price hike is inevitable. Best case scenario, 5%, as Kowalski put it. And there's this effort right now to convince you that all of these war crimes that we're committing in Iran is worth it because there's going to be some long-term benefit, right? Short-term pain for long-term gain. And this is being reinforced again and again and again in an effort that can only be described as psychological warfare to manufacture consent for this war. And if you don't believe me, see for yourself.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers.
We may have to deal with that in the short term.
Short-term and temporary.
Temporary short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Short-term pain. We have to focus on the short term.
Short-term.
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 Short-term and long-term.
Short-term blip. Hopefully this is a short-term pain.
Short-term is highly outweighed of the long-term benefits.
Some short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
They honestly think that if they repeat it enough, it'll stick. But it's not going to change the fact that we have nothing to gain from this war and everything to lose. And that's especially true for the innocent people of Iran. And it's important to keep in mind that even if they survive, which most Iranians will, the agricultural impact of this war is going to be felt for a very long time. And Kowalski specifically wanted to draw attention to the ecological impact of acid rain on Tehran.
Morally speaking, I think what just happened in Tehran is a crime against humanity with the detonation of their oil reserve tanks there. We know what acid rain does to food, to crops, to soil health. And what they've done there has compromised a very vulnerable ecosystem. Tehran was already suffering from chronic water shortages. They were already reliant on pumping stations and water treatment facilities. And by doing this, they have poisoned the soil that feeds a lot of the city. It will get into the drinking water. It will impact livestock, and it will likely increase cancer rates for a generation. That is a war crime. It is a crime against humanity. That is wrong on every level. Not just that, if our whole modus operandi of this war was to replace their government, you would not cripple a city the size of New York with poisoning their water supply. You wouldn't put all of their pumping stations at risk. You wouldn't put them at a risk of a water shortage. This is something that we really have to come to terms with all over the world, is the impact agriculture has on, ecosystems. We already know that it's likely overuse of fertilizer in places like Iowa that are leading to increased cancer rates, which, we're trying to address. And here, even in the wealthiest country in the world, where we have relatively good laws on water quality, we still can't clean this. And now we just destroyed all of the water systems around Tehran. And for what? It's just painful to see. And it's going to be just if in a wealthy country like the United States, we can't keep our water clean, what do we expect a sanctioned country like that to do? It just does not make any sense. I despise when people are, suffering needlessly. I'm also generally very concerned with how Iran is going to be able to produce food this year. Those energy reserves were something they absolutely needed for their own domestic agriculture. So this is going to hurt them very badly. And Central Asia is one of those areas where there has been persistent droughts in certain regions. There is food insecurity. We don't know what the long-term impact of the acid rain cloud is going to do. It was completely monstrous.
So it's devastating. And we don't know when this is going to end. In fact, Donald Trump doesn't even seem to know when it's going to end, seeing as how he's saying that the war is both complete and also that it's just the beginning. He's literally saying both of these things at the same time.
Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
So not even he knows when this is going to end, but even if it ends tomorrow, an immense amount of damage will have already been done. And we shouldn't simply just breathe a sigh of relief when it's over. Like, we should do that, but we shouldn't just do that. We should also push for accountability, because if leaders like him think that they can do things like this and get away with it, future presidents are going to do the same, and they're going to be even worse.